This episode's sponsored by Vorbos. Check them out in the description below.
And you were still at Barclays at this point, is that right? Both of you. Yeah. How did you manage to juggle that out of interest?
Not very well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I love those stories. Like, just the flashback is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, do either of you use Bloomberg?
No.
I've used it in the past. We
Okay,
used to have it
fine.
in my old office running, yeah.
Yeah, I just remember, I mean, we started Why Hangry. We told our compliance officer nothing was related to what we were doing.
Yeah.
It was like a
Mistake.
food and chef platform. And then it just became something that you started talking to clients about as well. It's like, oh, what were you doing on the weekend? Or how are you? Like, I mean, at that point, we were taking our laptops into work and then going in Canary Wharf and going to Starbucks after work to work on Why Hangry. And then at some point, I remember our bosses took us into an office, both of us together. It was like, when I went in, she was already there.
Let me explain this. You're gonna like skip part the hilarious bits. Okay, so I see myself called into a room, and I was like, that's really weird. As traders and salespeople, you can shout at each other on the floor
Yeah.
and get it over with.
Yeah.
You don't go into a room. That's like bad.
Everything's
stuff.
public.
And everything's public, like whatever. However, I was like, oh gosh. And then I saw Heinen with like a very straight face also walking towards, and I was like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? And then we went into the room, and then they were like, right, so this is just really, guys, this is very serious. And we were like, okay, what's up? They're like, so this is so embarrassing. Instead of selling bonds, just cracks me up. Our job is to buy and sell bonds, sure. Instead of doing that, like, you are talking about Why Angry to everyone. Like, there's a transcript for Heinen speaking to her ex-boss at Goldman Sachs, asking to borrow his baby
for like a photo shoot.
and they're like, they're
I'm so glad you added a caveat.
Yeah.
and then
We're doing a cooking platform. We're borrowing children.
Exactly.
And there are these 200 pages, like, where you mentioned the name. I just sat there and I looked at them and I was like, we're going to be very honest here. All the men talk about sports fucking all the time,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
how they bond with clients.
Yeah.
How the fuck do you care what we talk about? I'm talking about dancing. No one cares about dancing. I dance. That's useless. I'm telling them what I'm doing after work. I didn't ask a single client to book. I'm sharing my ideas and asking them what they think about it.
Yeah.
So obviously then they're like, okay, fine. But like, you guys are coming in a little bit later. And this is things like Heinen was meant to order groceries, and instead of the customer slate, she ordered it to Barclays. So then we were like, holy shit, all these groceries are here. And then someone
No. Actually, I accidentally ordered them to my home.
Oh, yeah.
And the booking was that day. And it was close to her home. So I took all the groceries
To work.
into the office, gave them to her, and
and
then
then-
took
fine.
them home.
At this point, it was quite obvious basically what you guys were doing.
So you
outside
just
of
walk-
work.
But the thing is, it
Walking in.
wasn't, because when someone sees you with groceries, I was like, yeah, I'm so sorry. I just accidentally ordered my home groceries here. And they were like, yeah, that's really fucking
That's a
weird.
lot of cauliflower there.
Yeah.
You've got-
Yeah. I could serve 14 people. That's a lot of...
Yeah, so I don't know what your question was, but those days were very funny because I
Yeah.
think we did everything to actually do everything at work. But we were like, let's take those extra 30 minutes in the morning.
Yeah.
Every evening, I remember going to Heinen's place in Westminster, and we were like, we're just going to work on this. We're going to create plans, just execute. Every weekend was devoted to this. It was a very exciting time. But what that meant was the more excited we got about this,
Yeah.
the more we wanted to like leave work at 5:30, even though like you then go for a client meeting and all this stuff. And we were like, and then at some point when this big meeting happened, I remember walking out and I just like started pissing myself. I was like, Heinen, I'm going to quit tomorrow. This is so ridiculous.
Really, that was
What?
the planning, because I was going to ask, at what point did you actually...
Yeah,
that,
that was my
was
next question.
That accelerated. So we always knew.
It was that eureka moment where we realized we can't juggle both for much longer.
Yeah.
And clearly we're more excited about Why Hangry. So I think we both decided that day that we're going to quit, but I was going to go on holiday to China, literally like the day after. So I didn't want to say like, okay, resignation and bye, I'm
Yeah,
off
yeah,
on
yeah,
holiday.
yeah, yeah.
I'll do the notice and hand
I mean,
over
we're going to
later.
get, we're going to live a broke founder's life, right? You might as well get 15 days worth of extra salary.
Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough.
So when did the actual decision come to leave? And was it based on sort of a financial number? Was it based on just gut impulse, or sort of one day you just woke up and said,
So
yes,
that day when the meeting happened was like literally, I quit the next day.
Okay.
Oh, you did actually quit the next
Yeah,
day?
but also I
Wow.
think in the run up to it, I think the things that we haven't spoken, that's hilarious. That was like meeting. And then when I quit, I remember them being like, no, wait, do you need more money? I was like, no, I just don't want to do
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Like, I can't do this. It's not about more money. It's very funny and counterintuitive.
I'm curious to know, I suppose this is more on the personal front, but still related to the business. What's What's your view on things like work-life balance versus hustle culture and things like that? Are you sort of a wake up at 5 a.m., work 18 hours a day kind of person? Are you very big on I need to have my days off to recover and things like that? What's your kind of approach to that?
Yeah, it's definitely changed over time. At the beginning, I was, and for a long time, very much kind of 18-hour days and 7 days a week, and really it was a lot of work in the first kind of 3-4 years. I think that is something I definitely have tried to not pass on to the rest of the team. So like as a culture and within the business, I've always been like relatively firm about like work-life balance and people not working on weekends and not working in evenings, and we've always had a sort of 8 till 6 or 7, and sometimes when we're in periods of things go on fire, which unfortunately has happened more often than not, then we are working like late and weekends sometimes. But I had like a number of different sort of, close to burnout challenges and things like that throughout the journey. So now over the last kind of couple of years have been much more focused on ensuring like always have at least one day off at the weekend, like much more often too now, and taking the downtime and being able to like be sort of fresh and focused versus like crazy hours. Because I think as the business evolves and as the team's got bigger and things like my job and the things that are important for me to do in the business do require having a clear mind and making good decisions and things like that actually when you are totally burnt out and not slept properly, you end up being counterproductive.
Totally. With that knowledge then, in hindsight, if you were starting the business again tomorrow, would you still have done it the way you did it, or would you do it differently now? Because there is an element or an argument, I guess you could say, of like in the beginning time, you almost need to go through the whole burnout, overworked thing to get it off the ground because there's so much to do.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't. I would do it differently in that I would probably not push it quite as hard as I did from a kind of hours and like health sacrifice and that sort of thing perspective. However, I think the thing around the early stages is there is so much to do, and you are like your passion, your soul, like everything is in that business, right? So you are spending a lot of time on it. But I think the much more important thing that I do a lot now that I would bring in earlier is much more around like discipline and exercise and sleep and things like that. So over time I've learned around like the importance of like getting 7 hours sleep and the importance of doing for me, I've got to do exercise like almost every day, 45 minutes like in the morning, and that'll like I'll be set for the day after doing that. Whereas in the early days, I'd definitely be like, I can't. I've got to. This thing's on fire.
Wake up, work, sleep.
Whereas I think actually just having discipline around the times in which you're working and the things in which you're doing around work that enable you to work better. So it's still you're still very much like focused on what you're doing, but making sure that you're kind of looking after the core parts of like health and productivity that enable you to do that.
And what do you think was driving you to work 18 hours a day when you first started?
I mean, there's definitely a passion point in there. Just like,
okay.
Yeah.
How do you know you've got a passion for it though?
You just feel it. I think
Okay.
it's not. There was never a point where I was like, oh god, I'm up really late working. I'm doing it because I wanted to do it. And there's always something to do. I mean, when you're starting a company, there's just like there is always a million things that you could be doing. So it's I think just, and also you've got such strong belief in you really want to make it work and you want it to be successful, and so that I think that drives a lot of the like, oh, if I just like do a bit more, or like, and deadlines as well, like trying to get things done by a certain time, like fundraising, and once you've raised money, like then you're on a time machine for everything because you've got X amount of time until that money runs out, and you've got to prove all these things, and you've got to get the business from here to here. So once you start that cycle, everything becomes very sort of like deadline and time ticking based, And then obviously when you get the moments when you're sort of running out of money and all that sort of thing, that's generally you're not sleeping. You're just so stressed.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Especially when other people's money's on the line, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I can believe
that'll make you lose sleep.
Well, definitely.
The life of an entrepreneur is obviously notoriously intense, and obviously it's a lot of work and crazy hours and very antisocial. How have you managed to sort of navigate waters like relationships, friendships, things like that? Because obviously, your work schedule probably, isn't as set as like a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
What's that been like?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I've never really struggled with it. I'm quite like a always on person anyway. Like I was always starting random businesses and loads of different ventures. Yeah, all through the years. So I think people like my I've been with my girlfriend for like 9 years now.
Yeah.
And I think she knew me when I was doing that, like weird random events companies. I had a drone business at one point. I did all sorts of weird stuff. So it was kind of all to be expected. And also, like, I think I've always been able to kind of switch off as well and be quite like, okay, now I'm focused on this thing, and now I'm at home and I'm just like chilling and, just watching some shitty TV or whatever. It's like you can have those two different modes. It doesn't have to be one or the other, always on kind of thing.
Have you got any advice for someone who doesn't know how to switch off?
That's what I was about to say.
I'm not saying that I do.
No,
for example,
I struggle.
but I mean,
I struggle with that. I can be relaxing, and in the back of my mind, way back there, I'll be like, I've got that Instagram thing I have to post, and I have to. I can't. How do you do that?
I think my way of doing it is just always like adding it to a list, like just having lists of stuff that you need to complete.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I've like. Even if it's like some big, quite scary thing that you need to do tomorrow or whatever, as soon as I add it to a list, I feel calm because I know that I'm going to get to it, and I know that I will do it tomorrow, even if it's at like 6 a.m. in the morning tomorrow. It doesn't really matter. I just know that it's now dealt with because it's kind of like the job is now done for today. There's no point really milling over it in your head and mulling over it, and just going around in circles because you can think about that tomorrow. And I don't know, like it's maybe it's just how my brain is set up, but I just think about stuff in like boxes and you just chuck it in the box, think about that tomorrow. And I definitely think that helps. But also, all the typical stuff of like, spend time with your friends, do sport, like, all of these kind of things do genuinely make a big difference as well. And, don't get too trapped in, I need to work 24/7 in order to make this thing work, because sometimes you need to step back from it and, go on the bloody Boris bike, and then you think of an idea or whatever it is, like you never know where that thing's going to come from. And sometimes changing context or whatever actually makes a massive impact, and then you figure out how to solve that thing.
Yeah, for sure. I saw in another interview you did, you said something that I think is quite relevant now, which is you said how obviously you started Tenzing at 42, I believe, and you made a point about how nowadays with all the Zucks and the sort of young CEOs, there is this kind of social pressure that if you're not a billionaire by 22, you're kind of lagging, and there's probably no point for you. And you made some interesting points about starting older, but I just thought that was really relevant because I think obviously at our age, we're sort of fully immersed in hustle culture and, the age of Instagram where everyone's having a great life on the surface of it, which we all know isn't necessarily the case. But could you maybe touch on that a little bit? Because I found that quite an interesting point.
Yeah, so that was really cool because I remember in one of, read an article, again, it happened to be the Harvard Business Review about like, huge piece of research, literally 50,000 people or something, and they checked founders and which were most successful. And I always ask that, when I go to speak to students, for instance, I say, what's the best age to launch your business? What's the most successful age? So they checked what's the most successful age to launch your business. So in other words, at what age are you most successful? And everyone always goes like 24, 25. And it's 42, which I happen to be exactly 42.
Okay. Just skewed the numbers.
Exactly.
What do you know? I started then.
But that's the most started, the most successful, and then that's the most started is 42. That's why the question is even better because you're like, what's the average age that people start the most companies is 42, and the most successful age I think is 45.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Colonel Sanders does skew that a little bit. To be honest with you.
But I think actually, I also from my own experience. It makes so much sense because I think you've still got all the energy you need, right? There's not like, obviously you can't be like maybe a pro footballer anymore, but at 42, you still got every energy you need for like at least, the next 10, 15, 20 years. and you got all the experience, you know, so you got all the network, the contacts, the experience in your field. So I think, it actually makes a lot of sense. And also it takes the pressure off, I think is an important one. Like you don't have to, you know, I think that's another also actually I think that all the successful founders have in common. It's not a recipe for success, but I think it's much more finding, you know, what you're good at than finding like a gap in the market. You know, if you think about like the Fever Tree guys, for instance, really interesting, right? One was like a gin. He was a CEO of a gin company, and the other was an advertising guy who made, you know, whatever. I think he came up with 3 quarts of your drink as a tonic, so you might as well mix it with the best. And, you know, them together was perfect because the one guy knew everything about gin and the other guy knew everything about how to launch a brand. You know, so that combo was perfect. You know, Zuckerberg was so young, so you get these because he was just like in this new world of, he was the best programmer that there had ever been, right? Like he was on Harvard, like he was like amazingly good. He didn't find a gap in the market unless he's even the social
he created a new market.
Well, he stole the idea, which was like, you could even argue that. But now I'm going to sound like a negative person. Well, like
just call it sending shots on everyone.
Yeah, but the fact, but you could argue the fact that he has no problem with stealing ideas and launching them in a better way is what he did his whole career. Right, and you could argue that's a very smart move. So he, like, you know, then he saw Instagram, like,
Instagram story,
that, and then the stories, everything. Just like you know, pick something up and better and do that well. So I think you have to be really good at something. So that's why it also, again, if you're younger, you know, find something you love doing and hone in on that. Maybe you're not going to start a business. You know, who cares? It's not like life's better if you start a business or anything. But if you do, then you're really good at something, and then you've got a good shot of launching something that in the field that you're good at, as opposed to, oh, I found this idea, I saw this thing in America, and I'm going to launch it now. You know, those don't work as often, I think.
That's very true.
Speaking of that culture, you recently introduced unlimited annual leave, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, we did.
Can you talk a little bit more to that and why you made that decision?
Because we got bored of counting holidays.
Nice.
I just think, you know, it wasn't my decision. Again, it was a collective decision. And look, you know, I always say to people, you know, as the business has grown, fewer and fewer people report into me, but I do run our executive search arm, one function of the business. And you know, you're talking adult to adult, you're having conversations, and they say, "Oh, how many days holiday do I get?" And I always think I sort of know the answer to that question, but like, my response is, if I'm having to count, or you are, there's a bit more of a problem within that. It's like, I'm not asking you to work your weekends, but from time to time, I'm hoping you'll want to, not because I want you to, it's because you're full of this passion to deliver on behalf of your client. That means, you know, not 10-hour days over the weekend, but so for me, it's just this trust and trade thing. It's like, I'm not counting, and if I have to go and count, there's probably more of a problem than the amount of holidays you've taken. Does that make sense?
No, I completely agree. I've always thought it's crazy. I haven't done the corporate thing for a while, but I always find it crazy when, you know, I mean, you even said the other day, you know, about this idea of like, I've only got one or a half day. It's like,
it's
you
really,
do the work.
It's really important for me to add, you know, we're not this sort of, you know, utopian type of environment where, you know, everything is just easy. If, and I'm not saying we have these people, if you were just woefully kind of below par, like, or above par, I'm not a golfer, you know, missing every mark, turning up to work late when you're there, and going and booking, you know, like 7 months in Guatemala, of course, of course there's going to be a conversation.
A bit of common sense,
But it's a trust-based situation, and I think the longer I've done this, you can motivate people for a minute or an hour or a month, but to, you know, for me to try and continually motivate you, I think is a waste of my energy and a waste of your own in a way. It's like, you know, I'm looking for people who want to do this for them. And what I want to do is create this environment that works for them, because I'd experienced an environment that didn't work for me. So I'm doing all I can just to create this platform that enables people to build their dreams.
I think it's hard to find that balance, especially with people coming in as graduates now. The mentality is so different, as we've talked about with other guests. It's people are sort of less willing, should we say, to put the work in and actually work work hard and do what's expected. There's a sort of certain expectation of whether it's working from home or having more flexibility or just being a little bit sort of fluffier, should we say, on the outside.
Completely true.
We've definitely seen that.
Yeah, and I think again, I think I know we all talk about the world changing, but I don't think human beings have changed massively, right? I think that hardwired within us, we want progress, we want to be successful, we want to feel like we're doing something meaningful. That hasn't really changed. Meaningful might mean different things now. Maybe in the 50s or 60s, meaningful might have been provision for my family, right?
Yeah.
And putting food on the table. Coming out of not generationally out of a war era and ration era to then saying actually provision means nowadays meaningful might be more around my own personal fulfillment, but that changes pretty quickly, I think, once you stop being so inward looking, right? So I think we are an increasingly inward looking generation. We talk about self-actualization way more than our probably our parents or grandparents. But as soon as you have a responsibility that's outside of yourself, so if you meet someone, right, have a partner, husband, wife, and then have potentially kids, you start to think, well, my meaning's external, right? And so I think that really changes the dynamic. And I think part of the challenge is helping a group of people, who've kind of left school, left the education system, where a lot of it has been around, the narrative is me, and my identity, my ego, and we've lost a wider narrative around society and culture. If you have a faith, how you fit in within, that, for me, a church community, or Jewish society, whatever it is, it's become, wherever in the Western world, much more around my identity is me and who am I, and helping people understand, well, that will change over time because all of us get older. Our priorities do change, and then within the workplace, how do you kind of rewire? Look, our job here is to my thought is to make you good at something and to make you successful, and that's a two-way street. You bring your version of your best every day, and we need to input and train that and help you become successful. And the more successful you become, weirdly, the more enjoyable the job becomes as well. I think that beyond money, that feeling of I'm doing well is way more powerful.
Definitely.
So there's one more thing that I was curious to ask you. Do you believe that entrepreneurs are born or made? Because I feel like when you look at someone like, I don't know, Elon Musk or Zuck, and to be fair,
I'm just calling him Zuck now.
Yeah.
They're on that basis.
Also, did you hear about the cage match?
Yeah, I guess I say there's only going to be one of them soon, right? So
Yeah. Who's your money on, Zuck or Elon?
Oh, I just think Elon's got it, hasn't he?
It's got to be.
I'll be
Elon.
really
It's gotta
sad
be
if
Elon.
Zuck wins.
I thought Elon because he's
Plus,
bigger.
Andrew Tate has now officially said he's going to train Elon on Twitter.
I
as
saw
well.
that.
It's not at all problematic.
Yeah,
Not at all.
but apparently Zuck's been doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
Has he?
For
he's
like
been doing a lot
years.
of MMA.
So I'm like,
okay.
I
It's
would
dark
rather
horse.
Elon,
Okay.
but I feel
No,
like
on-
Zuck
on-
might come out with a cheeky rear
Really?
naked choke.
On paper, like Zuck wins, but that just is too depressing a thought.
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah, it
so-
is.
I agree with that.
I agree with
To
that.
my point, I feel like when you look at someone like Elon or someone like Zuck, they're clearly just next level in terms of their capabilities intellectually. And I think, to be fair to it, to some extent, you're kind of the same. And and you were also very resourceful from an early age. You clearly showed signs of entrepreneurialism from a young age. You always had side hustles and jobs. And even while you're at Oxford, where most people would kind of, I don't know, but I would assume at least coast to some extent because they're like, well, I'm at Oxford, I'll be okay. You were still going back and, doing sailing, instructing and then renting cars and this kind of stuff. And then you were tinkering with, software companies and this and that. You were clearly very resourceful and very entrepreneurial. And I feel like you kind of fall in that same category as someone who doesn't know you, a bit like the kind of Elon Zuck type personality where it's like they were clearly just meant to be someone like that. So do you think that's the kind of thing where anyone can just be an entrepreneur, or do you think you kind of have to have something?
I think, I've met lots of entrepreneurs who are successful and quite different to me as well. So I think, I maybe fit a particular archetype.
Can we address that archetype? Because I do agree
Yeah.
with you, and I think we would probably all agree with that. But I'm talking more about the highly technical, highly intellectual sector of entrepreneurialism.
Fundamentally, I don't know. I think it sort of snowballs. I think there's a seed kind of interest, and you go out, you kind of scratch away at something, you figure out how to solve a problem. That's really gratifying. you start to seek that out again and again and again. Then you start to challenge systems or push things or ask questions, and you realize that, like, holy shit, I was right. The system was broken, and actually there is a better way. Or, and so there are tons of things that didn't work out, right? Like tons and tons of things I did that didn't work out. And I've had a kind of stubborn kind of willingness to just go and try the next thing. But I think there are also lots of things in there that I probably take for granted, which were reinforcement learning around, challenging something and then actually being proven right, and then going, okay, I should keep plugging away at it. But I guess it's, there are, the thing that always fascinates me is, talented musicians, talented artists. It's like that for me. I can just sit and lose so much time watching a talented artist because it's something that's so alien to me. Their ability to create from nothing, or to paint something they see, or to make music. It's how much of that is a natural aptitude? Probably quite a lot. But equally, there has to have been some early reinforcement. I think it's like, maybe some of us have been quite lucky that we've maybe sort of found out what those things are quite early, and then been able to hone them.
Do you meditate? Because you seem very zen. I was thinking that the whole interview.
Not in a traditional way. I'm like a sort of hardcore introvert. So, or I probably like a high functioning introvert. So, I'm quite good at sort of public speaking. I'm quite good at presenting or whatever, but I didn't used to be. That's very much a learned skill. But I spend a lot of time sort of in my own head. I like to think about things. If I get, honestly, one of the nicest things I get is like a 4 or 5 hours alone at home. I had to drive to France recently, a sort of 8-hour drive on my own. A few of my team were kind of shocked when they were like, "Oh, what do you listen to?" And I was like, "Literally nothing. No music, no podcast."
Alone with your thoughts.
The first 6 hours was complete silence, and it was absolutely brilliant because I just, I have this like whole backlog of things I just want to think about.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, on that note, what are your thoughts on hustle culture and that kind of thing, and like grinding and doing all this kind of stuff?
I think I don't really believe in it. You're either you if you want to work, you're going to work. There's no sort of culture around it. It's just the way you kind of are. You're either brought up and you work hard because that's what you do, or you don't. I don't believe in like working 20 hours a day or some ridiculous. And you know what? Taking time out and going on holiday with your family for a week is a really great thing. Doesn't mean that I don't get up like 2 hours early and check all my emails, because then I know that nothing's like, the building's not burned down. But once I've done that, if I can spend a half a day and, really like chill out on a beach with the kids and play football and go for a swim and all that sort of stuff, that's really important. The hustle culture thing, I think there's a lot of sort of TikToks and all this sort of stuff, which is disingenuous, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned your wife and your kids, obviously, and you've had, as Ski said, very successful business. What has the impact been in terms of like managing a personal relationship with a business? 'Cause I think a lot of people have different views on that. Some people think when they're coming up and building something, they need to be kind of all focused, and some people think they couldn't have done it without their partner. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think getting married and settling down really kind of brings a bit of perspective, because you've got a partner, then you've got children, and time becomes a lot more precious. And then you're like, okay, now we need to kind of book this in, and it's not movable. Before, things were movable for work. Everything's kind of work around work. Even if you're going on holiday, you're going for, because there's something you can do there. There's potentially I don't know, a supply source or an embellishment or something. Everything was work related. Now with that, it definitely helps you see the other side.
I probably spent my 20s and 30s working 7 days a week. And I remember once, and it was wrong to do so because it'll ruin your life, and you'll put on a lot of weight. I remember once, it was a Sunday afternoon, it's 4 p.m. and I said to myself, I've got an hour off. I was so excited. That's wrong. So there is a price you pay for all of this.
So you wouldn't say you loved what you were doing then at that point?
I loved it, but there's a price to pay for addiction. an obsession. And by the way, 1999. Well, the premonitions that I used to get, not premonitions, these strong feelings I get. I remember saying to my grandmother, I said, I think I'm going to be asked to do something in government. This is where it gets spooky. I think I'm going to get a letter from the Prime Minister. This was the time where I could think of something and it would happen. It's nuts.
Do you believe in The Secret?
I don't know. I mean, there's people who've got incredibly successful lives who believe in it. I was gobsmacked when I saw Oprah Winfrey believed in it, and it happens. I think what it is whether you believe in that part or not, it's the fact that whatever you're thinking about constantly, it's not that you necessarily I can think all the time about losing weight, but it's not going to happen unless I move my arse. It's the fact that you end up doing something about what you're obsessed about. So if you're obsessed about, I mean, I think it's from Citizen Kane, where he says, it's a fantastic line. He goes, "There's no secret to make. There's no difficulty to making money if making money is what you care about." And it's that point of the obsession. I soon discovered making money wasn't what I was obsessed about, in actual fact. And as a friend of mine once put it, a former MP put it, he says, "You don't actually have the greed gene," and I don't. Because I wasn't raised that way. My family actually were in business. They were all in business. My dad floated a company on the Mumbai Stock Exchange, even though he left school at 16 with no qualifications. And my uncles and aunts, they had a business in nightclubs and hotels in the north of England. There weren't many teetotal Gujaratis who had probably one of the most popular nightclubs, Orbit, for those who know it. And you'd have queues around the block. So I saw what real success looks like. Your dad's building a factory and you're sort of there looking at it going, that's a real thing. I mean, the stuff I do is all ethereal. It's not really there. I buy shares in Apple. I didn't invent Apple, and then I sell it for a bit more later. As some of my TikTok followers will say, that makes me a parasite. I won't go that far. And others would say, well, you haven't invented or created anything, and you're absolutely right. It's completely worthless activity.
And so how does your, if as to say, if at all, does your perspective change?
Yes, sorry, to return to your question.
Because that's obviously such a pivotal moment in someone's life when that happens. So
God, it makes you think, I reckon, about the positions that you put yourself in and what is important kind of in the end. Because as I said to you just before we started, I was kind of sort of on my deathbed, although not on my deathbed as it turned out, and thinking about what was important in my life. And you only really think about your relationships with other people. So for me, I'm very close with my family, and I certainly made the decision from then on to really prioritize them as much as I could. I think I was still, in the couple of years after, I was still quite young and a bit foolhardy about it, but I think I see very clearly now that if you're, to bring it back a little bit, I think a good day for me looks like I'm proud of every single decision I've made. And the way I think about it now is the pride in my decisions come from knowing how to prioritize things in my life and respond to things in the best way. So if something is happening with my family or one of my friends, I want to have the presence of mind and the perspective to be like, actually, what am I doing right now? And what is so important that I'm doing right now, particularly with regard to work, which is a big focus of people our age. What is the thing that I'm doing that is so critically important that I can't show up for someone that I love or that I care about? And I've promised myself that as far as possible, I will try to figure out actually the interplay between those forces and prioritize effectively. So it's not always easy. Like recently, my mum said, "Oh, I'm gonna go away to." She wants to go to America to visit some family friends, and she asked me if I wanted to come on the holiday with her. And if I was totally focused on my family, I would be like, absolutely. It's the first time my mum will have been away without my dad, and it would be nice for her to have company. But I also have to balance that a little bit against what's going on with my business, which is also really important to me. And ultimately, does my mum need me there? And then I speak to her and I say, "Mum, do you need me there?" And she said no, and that's kind of the situation sorted. But I think really considering how
who needs you and how they might need you, and trying to get a bit of dialogue going so that you can figure out if you can help people when they need help.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said for, especially when you're younger, but I suppose at any point when you're building something, there has to be a degree of not selfishness, but kind of enlightened self-interest. You have to be able to be like, I have some sort of purpose that I'm trying to achieve here, and I have to make some sacrifices for it, even if they might not be the sacrifices that, I want to make. And I think everyone talks about sacrifices. It's quite a common thing, it's like, hey, you got to sacrifice if you want to build something and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's only when you're actually faced with those situations where it's like, yeah, you probably would have loved to spend time with your mum, but
Yeah.
you do, that is a sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice like seeing that friend that you don't really want to see and being like, oh, sorry, man, can't make it.
Yeah.
That's not really a sacrifice.
Yeah.
But it's a sacrifice when it's like, I really want to do that thing, but I can't because of how dedicated I am to this thing.
Yeah. And I think trying to figure out, actually unpick why you want what you want, and is that actually the best course of action for you and the people you care about, is also is good. But I think the sacrifices I'm willing to make, kind of exactly as you're saying, I'm willing to spend most of my Sunday working behind a market stall in Camden Passage, because I know I enjoy it and it's fun and it's good for the business, and I've missed out on a bunch of Sunday lunches and maybe a bit of sport too, the occasional football game, because of that. But that is a sacrifice that I'm very willing to make, and it's there I'm only considering my own enjoyment. It's quite singular. But as soon as someone you care about enters the frame, whether that's a family member or a friend, and you start thinking about, actually, how much does my commitment to whatever they're doing make a difference to their lives, then I think it becomes a lot less clear. And as the best advice I could give is just trying to appraise that in the most rational way of, how important is this person to you, and how important is whatever they're doing that they need you for, and then trying to make a decision on that basis. It's one of the key reasons that I started the business in the first place. My dad was diagnosed with a serious illness, and I wanted to be there and spend as much time with him as possible. And I'm very proud and lucky that I've managed to do that. I've sold some ginger beer along the way, but it's created a life for me that has allowed for the kind of flexibility that I was looking for. And this is, like we were saying at the beginning, just like being able to prioritize things effectively is actually really, really hard, because all kind of stresses and time pressures and deadlines come into your life, particularly in the course of an ordinary job or a high pressure job, whatever job you do. And it's really important not to let those forces kind of overcome you and stop you realizing what is important.